The house always smelled of lemon polish and old books, a comforting smell. I used to think that night the dining room table gleamed under the warm light of the chandelier. His mother had set out her good china, the plates with the delicate gold rim. There was laughter too. His sister was telling a story about her kids, and everyone was smiling. I remember thinking, this is it, this is the feeling I've been waiting for. After 3 years of marriage, I finally felt like I was sitting at a family table, not just visiting a museum of someone else's history. I'd spent the whole afternoon making the dessert, a lemon tart from scratch, because his mother once mentioned it was his father's favorite. I thought it was a peace offering, a bridge. My hand was resting on the tablecloth, and Mark reached over and covered it with his. His palm was warm. He gave my fingers a little squeeze. See, I told myself, we're a team. He sees me trying, but when I looked at him, his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He was quieter than usual. I thought he was just tired from work. I squeezed his hand back, a silent promise that we'd be home soon, just the two of us. Then his mother handed me a salad bowl. Our fingers brushed, and she pulled her hand away a little too quickly. She looked at the tart I'd placed on the sideboard and said, "Oh, you went to so much trouble. How ambitious of you." And she smiled. It was the same smile she used when she'd compliment my dress, and then mention it was a style her daughter would never wear. I brushed it off. I was so determined to see the good, to believe the warmth in the room was real. I was building a house on what I thought was solid ground. I didn't know it was all built over a fault line. It was such a small thing that started it. His father asked about our vacation plans for the summer. I was excited. We'd been saving for a trip to Italy, a proper honeymoon we never took. I started talking about the Amalfi Coast, the research I'd done, the little hotel I'd found overlooking the water. I was looking at Mark, sharing the excitement, when I felt the temperature in the room drop. I turned back to his mother. Her smile was gone, completely gone. Her face was smooth and cold like marble. She placed her fork down. The gentle clink against the plate was the only sound. The conversation at the table died out. She looked right at me, not at Mark, not at her husband, just at me. Her eyes were like two chips of flint. "It's interesting," she said, her voice low and precise, "how you just assume you'll be making these decisions, planning a future, as if it's a given." My heart started to beat a little faster. "I'm sorry, I don't understand," I managed to say. My voice sounded thin, reedy. "That's the problem," she said, not breaking eye contact. "You never have understood. You waltzed in here with your new ideas and your lemon tarts, and you think a marriage certificate changes anything." She leaned forward slightly. "Let me be perfectly clear so there is no more misunderstanding. You can sit at this table, you can sleep in my son's bed, but you will never ever be part of this family." The words didn't make sense at first. They were just sounds. Then they ranged themselves into a meaning so brutal, so final, that the air left my lungs. It was a physical blow. I felt the world tilt. The light from the chandelier seemed to sharpen, highlighting every pore on her face, every judgment in her eyes. The room was utterly silent. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now, not after I'd let my guard down. My first instinct was to find Mark. I turned to him, my head moving slowly as if through water. My eyes were pleading. "Say something, defend me, tell her she's wrong, tell her I am your family." This was the man who promised to cherish me, the man who held my hand in the hospital when I had my appendix out, the man who whispered in the dark that I was his home. I looked at him, and I waited for the shield I knew he could be. He wouldn't look at me. He was staring down at his plate at the half-eaten piece of chicken. His jaw was tight, the silence stretched, becoming a living thing in the room, suffocating me. It was longer than a minute. It was an eternity of waiting on the edge of a cliff. Then he let out a long, slow breath. He finally lifted his head, but he didn't look at me. He looked at his mother, and he said, "Mom, just stop. She doesn't get it. You're just upsetting her." It wasn't a denial. It wasn't a defense. It was an acknowledgement, a confirmation. She doesn't get it. As if I were a child who couldn't comprehend a complex adult truth. The floor didn't just drop out from under me. The entire structure of my life crumbled into dust. The betrayal was so complete, so visceral, that a wave of nausea washed over me. My skin felt cold and clammy. I could feel the blood draining from my face. This was the ultimate conspiracy. It wasn't just her against me, it was the two of them, bound by a loyalty I was never and would never be part of. And then I saw it, the slightest hint of a smile on his mother's lips. It wasn't a smile of joy, but of victory, a silent, triumphant seal on my exile. She had won. She had always known she would win. In that moment, I was completely and utterly alone in a room full of people. I was a ghost at the table. I don't remember standing up. I just remember the sensation of movement, of pushing my chair back. The screech of wood on wood was deafening. I muttered something. Probably I need air, but the words were garbled. I walked out of the dining room, down the hall, my legs carrying me on autopilot. I half expected to hear Mark's footsteps behind me, his voice calling my name, but there was nothing, only the sound of the front door closing behind me. A soft final click. I sat in the driver's seat of my car. The street was quiet and dark. The engine was off. I just sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I could see the warm lit windows of the house I had just fled inside. Life was presumably continuing. They were probably clearing the plates. My lemon tart was still on the sideboard, uneaten, a stupid, futile effort. Then the replay started. It was like a film reel behind my eyes, but sharper, more cruel. I saw every backhanded compliment from the last 3 years. Every time had said, "Oh, that's just how Mom is," and asked me to let it go. Every holiday where I felt like a guest, every family story that started with "remember when," that I had no part in. The signs were all there. I had just painted over them with hope. I had mistaken his silence for support, when it was really just compliance. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst from a bitter woman. This was a long-held shared belief, a truth they both knew and had carefully managed until tonight, when the facade became too heavy to maintain. The dinner wasn't an acceptance, it was a test. And I had failed by simply existing, by daring to believe I belonged. A final thought didn't arrive with drama. It was a quiet, cold fact that settled in the hollow space where my heart used to be. This wasn't just about a terrible dinner. This was about the foundation of my marriage. If he agreed with her, if his primary loyalty was to the family I could never join, then what were we? We weren't a partnership. We were a temporary arrangement. The man I loved was a stranger, and the life I thought we were building was just a rental property, and the lease was up. The foundation of this entire situation, the reason why that dinner could even happen the way it did, rests on a very specific and unhealthy family system. It's not just about a difficult mother-in-law or a husband who doesn't stand up for you. It's about a structure, a blueprint for relationships that was drawn long before I ever entered the picture. The clinical term is enmeshment. It describes a family where the boundaries between individuals are So blurred, so porous that people don't have a clear sense of where they end and another person begins. It's a system that demands loyalty above all else, even above truth, even above the well-being of its members. In our case, the core of this enmesh system is the relationship between my husband and his mother. This goes beyond a close bond. This is what some therapists call emotional incest, where a parent uses a child to meet their emotional needs that should be met by another adult. He wasn't just her son, he was her surrogate spouse, her primary confidant, her emotional support system. From a very young age, he was trained to be hyper-aware of her moods, to soothe her anxieties, to prioritize her happiness as if it were his own primary responsibility. His identity became fused with his role as her caretaker and protector. Disagreement with her wasn't just a difference of opinion, it was perceived as a personal betrayal, a threat to the very foundation of his world. And my role in this system was predetermined from the moment we got serious. I was the outsider, the threat in an enmeshed family. Any new person, especially a spouse, is seen as competition for loyalty and attention. I was automatically cast as the scapegoat. Every problem, every bit of tension could be conveniently blamed on me. If he was spending time with me, he was neglecting her. If he supported me in a decision, he was being disloyal to her. My very existence in his life was the problem she had to solve. This wasn't personal, not in the way you might think. It was systemic. The system needed a scapegoat to maintain its unstable equilibrium, and I was elected for the job. His conditioned response was the key to keeping it all running. After a lifetime of training, his neural pathways were wired to seek her approval and avoid her disapproval at all costs. It was a survival mechanism. Disagreeing with her meant facing a withdrawal of love, facing her emotional collapse, and ultimately facing the terrifying prospect of being cast out from the only identity he had ever known. The confrontation at that dinner wasn't a spontaneous argument, it was a staged event, a carefully orchestrated play where everyone had a role, and the outcome was almost predetermined. She chose a public setting for a reason. It was a power move. An audience of family members created pressure, a sense of spectacle. She needed witnesses to her son's ultimate declaration of loyalty. She created a scenario, a comment about my career choices that she knew would provoke a reaction, setting the stage for the main event. This was psychological warfare. Her declaration of always known you weren't right for him, and I'm glad he finally agrees, was just an insult. It was a strategic detonation designed to achieve two things: to humiliate and isolate me completely, and to publicly claim her son, to force him into a corner where he had to visibly choose a side. The words were meant to invalidate my entire place in the family, to erase me. And why did he agree? Why did he sit there in that devastating silence and then give that almost imperceptible nod? This is the hardest part to understand, because our instinct is to see it as malice, but in this toxic framework, it's rarely that simple. He didn't agree because he secretly shared her beliefs. He agreed out of a deep primal fear. The fear of his mother's disapproval is for him a physiological reaction. It triggers a fight-or-flight response, and in that moment his survival instinct, programmed over decades, was to appease the threat. It was a reflex, a conditioned loyalty. He was choosing to avoid the immediate, terrifying conflict with her over the slower, more abstract pain he was causing me. It was a failure of courage, yes, but it was a failure born out of a lifetime of emotional captivity. This is the classic pattern of triangulation. She positioned herself against me, and she forced him into the middle. A healthy relationship is a straight line between two people in a triangulated dynamic. All communication and conflict get routed through a third person. She couldn't attack me directly without risking his defense of me. So she attacked through him, forcing him to be the messenger of her disdain by getting him to agree. She effectively merged with him, creating a unified front against me. It was the two of them against the outsider. This is the ultimate goal of the enmeshed parent, to maintain the primary bond at the expense of the marital bond. The impact of that moment, that betrayal, is a specific kind of injury. Psychologists call it betrayal trauma. This isn't just regular hurt or disappointment. This is the profound shock that comes when someone you deeply trust, someone you rely on for your safety, and reality violates that trust in a fundamental way. The person who was supposed to be your partner, your sanctuary, becomes the source of your danger. The first casualty is your sense of safety. The world suddenly feels unstable and threatening if you can't trust the person you share a bed with. Who can you trust? But more insidiously, betrayal trauma attacks your sense of reality. You start to question your own perceptions. Did I imagine our connection? Was our entire marriage a lie? Am I overreacting? This is the gaslighting effect, not necessarily because he was actively trying to make me doubt myself, but because his actions so violently contradicted our shared reality that my mind couldn't reconcile it. The ground beneath you turns to quicksand. Then comes the grief, and it's a dual grief. You are mourning the loss of the relationship you thought you had with your husband. The man you believed would protect you is gone, replaced by a stranger who capitulated to your humiliation. And at the same time, you are mourning the loss of a fantasy of a happy integrated family of holidays and grandchildren and shared memories. That future, which felt so tangible, evaporates in an instant. Perhaps the most damaging part is the assault on your self-esteem. The internalization begins almost automatically. If my own husband won't defend me, if he agrees that I'm not right for him, then maybe they're correct. Maybe I am unworthy. Maybe I am the problem. The message of the betrayal is that you are not good enough to be protected, that your feelings are not important enough to warrant a defense. It's a poison that seeps into your own view of yourself. Finding a path forward toward healing and clarity requires a complete shift in perspective. The first and most crucial step is to recognize that the problem is the system, not necessarily the individuals within it, though they are responsible for their actions. This isn't about me being a bad wife or her being an evil woman. It's about a dysfunctional family structure that consumes people. Understanding this is what prevents you from spiraling into self-blame. You see the mechanics of the machine, and you understand that you were caught in its gears. For there to be any hope of saving the marriage, the central task falls to my husband. Whether he chooses to undertake it or not, he must achieve differentiation. This is the psychological process of separating from his mother emotionally. It means developing a sense of self that is distinct from his role as her son. It means learning that his worth is not dependent on her approval. It means tolerating the extreme anxiety of setting a boundary with her and realizing that he will not in fact disintegrate. It is the work of growing up at a fundamental emotional level, and it is incredibly difficult work that requires intense self-awareness and likely professional therapy concurrently. I must set radical boundaries. This isn't about simple requests or compromises. Radical boundaries are about defining what I will and will not accept for my own mental health. This means no more contact with his mother is a non-negotiable. It means that if he wants to remain in this marriage, he must commit to a process of differentiation and therapy, and he must demonstrate through consistent actions that his primary loyalty is to our marriage. It means being prepared to enforce consequences up to and including separation if those boundaries are violated. This isn't punishment, it's self-preservation. Ultimately, this journey leads to empowerment. It's about reclaiming my reality. My experience of that dinner was real. The pain was valid. The betrayal was profound. I get to define that I am no longer waiting for him or his family to validate my truth. The decision about what happens next, whether the marriage continues or ends, will be based on self-respect. It will be a choice made from a place of clarity about what I need and deserve, not a desperate attempt to win a battle against his mother or to fix a man who may not be capable of change. The power is no longer in their hands. It's in the simple, quiet decision to honor my own experience and act accordingly. The smell of roasted chicken and herbs filled the house, a warm, comforting smell that promised a kind of belonging I desperately wanted to believe in. The dining room table was set with their good china, the plates with the delicate gold rim that felt cool and smooth under my fingertips. Every time my knife touched one, it made this tiny, sharp, elegant sound, and underneath it all the low hum of conversation, my father-in-law's deep laugh, my husband Mark's familiar voice. It all created this illusion of perfection, a picture I was so carefully trying to step into. I remember looking at Mark as he poured wine for his parents. He had that nervous energy he always gets around them, a little too loud, a little too quick to smile. He caught my eye and gave me a small, tight smile, a silent message that everything was going to be fine. His mother, Eleanor, sat perfectly straight in her chair, her hands folded in her lap. She was smiling too, but her eyes were like two little blue lasers, taking in every detail. The way I'd set the table, the cut of my dress, the simple necklace I'd chosen. She was weighing and measuring everything, and his father Robert was telling some long, rambling story about a business deal, his voice a comfortable rumble. He was kind in a distant sort of way, but he lived in a world curated entirely by Eleanor. He saw only what she allowed him to see. My hope for the evening was a fragile thing. I thought, if I could just get through this dinner, if I could just be charming and helpful and perfect, then maybe finally the last wall would come down. I would stop being Mark's wife and start being their daughter. But then my eyes drifted to the large family portrait hanging on the wall opposite me. It was taken a few years before Mark and I met. It was just the three of them. A perfect closed loop, Mark younger with an arm around each parent. Every time I looked at that picture, I felt like an outsider looking in through a window. Just as I was staring at it, I heard a sudden drop in the conversation from the kitchen. I'd gone to get the water pitcher, and I heard Eleanor's low, precise whisper to Mark. The first only caught a fragment. Not really, the point is, it, Mark, you have to consider. And then they heard my footsteps, and it stopped. The silence that followed was louder than the whisper. Mark came out, his face a little pale, carrying the salad bowl. He wouldn't meet my eyes. We sat down to eat. The first few minutes were a careful dance of passing plates and compliments. The chicken is delicious, Sarah. You've outdone yourself. but the compliments felt like questions. The first cut was so subtle I almost missed it. Eleanor took a small bite of the potatoes she chewed thoughtfully, then looked at me. "These are lovely, dear, a very ambitious choice of seasoning, not quite how I would have done it, but it's certainly interesting." Mark jumped in immediately. "I think they're great, Mom, lots of flavor." He was trying to build a bridge, but his words just highlighted the chasm. Then Robert, meaning no harm, asked me about my work. I'd recently taken a promotion that involved more travel. I started to explain, feeling a spark of pride talking about the project. Eleanor listened, her head tilted. "More travel," she said. "When I finished, that must be so difficult for Mark, all those evenings alone." "I suppose it's a different generation. I always believed being present for your family was the priority." Mark laughed, a short, brittle sound. "Oh, I manage, Mom. Order a lot of pizza, it's fine." But his eyes were pleading with me not to engage, to just let it go. The small cuts kept coming. A comment about the neighborhood we'd chosen to buy, and a reference to a cousin's wedding that was so much more intimate than ours. Each one was a tiny pinprick, but I could feel them adding up, a slow bleed of my confidence. I felt myself shrinking inside. My smile became stiff, my responses clipped. I was a specimen under glass, and Eleanor was noting every flaw. I could feel the hope I'd carried into the evening beginning to curdle into a cold dread. The turning point came with the dessert. I was clearing the main course plates, my hands trembling just a little, making the china rattle. Eleanor stayed seated, watching me. She took a slow sip of her wine. "Sarah," she said, her voice deceptively soft, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you. Mark tells us you're not certain about starting a family soon, that it's a complicated decision for you." The air went out of the room. This was the trap. We had had that conversation in private. Just Mark and me. It was raw and honest and full of our own fears and dreams, and he had distilled it into this simple, damning summary for his mother. I looked at him. His face was frozen, a deer in the headlights. He knew had betrayed a confidence. Eleanor leaned forward slightly. "I'm just curious, dear. Given that you're so focused on your career, and given that you don't have any family of your own to lean on, what exactly is your long-term plan for this marriage? What is it that you bring to this family?" The room was utterly silent. The hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen seemed to roar in my ears. I could feel the eyes of all three of them on me. Robert looked uncomfortable, staring into his wine glass. Mark looked terrified, and Eleanor's gaze was steady, cold, and utterly without mercy. This was at the moment of judgment. And then Mark spoke. His voice was quiet, barely a whisper. But in that silence it was like a gunshot. "Mom, please don't. It's a sensitive subject." He wasn't defending me. He was apologizing for me. He was agreeing with her that the question was valid, that my feelings were a problem to be sensitive about. I felt the shock move through my body like a wave of ice. It started in my chest, a sharp cracking sensation, and then radiated out to my fingertips, which went numb. I looked at his face. This man I loved, this man I had built a life with, and I saw not an ally but a prisoner of his mother's approval, too scared to ever truly be free. The mask of conflict and fear on his face wasn't for me, it was for her. In that moment, the foundation of our entire marriage, the trust I had placed in him, it just vaporized. My fork slipped from my hand. It hit the edge of my plate with a sharp, high-pitched clatter that seemed to go on forever, the sound echoing in the profound quiet. That sound was the shattering. It was the sound of my heart breaking. I didn't say a word. I just pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the wooden floor. I stood up, my legs feeling like they didn't belong to me. I walked out of the dining room, through the living room, my vision tunneling. I heard Mark say my name, a weak strangled sound. I heard Eleanor say, "Mark, let her go, she needs to cool off." I opened the front door and stepped out into the cool night air. The door slammed behind me, a final definitive boom. I stood on the porch, breathing in deep, ragged gulps, trying to remember how my body worked. A few minutes later, the door opened. It was Mark. "Sarah, wait, come back inside, please, you're making a scene." I turned to look at him. His face was pale, his eyes wide with panic. "Just come back, and she didn't mean it like that. You know how she is. She's just worried about us." His excuses were like handfuls of dust. They were hollow and weak, and they blew away in the slightest breeze. I just stared at him, seeing a stranger. I walked to the car and got in. He followed, standing outside the passenger window, talking through the glass, his words muffled and meaningless. I started the engine. The roar drowned him out. He finally stepped back, his shoulders slumping in defeat. As I drove away, the tears finally came, hot, silent tears that streamed down my face. But they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of a terrible, final clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a bad night. This was the truth, the fundamental, unchangeable truth of my marriage. I had married a man who would always choose his mother's comfort over his wife's heart. He would never stand beside me. He would only ever stand between us. So what comes next, I don't know. The road ahead is dark and unfamiliar. The life I thought I had, the future I planned, it's all gone, broken into pieces on a dining room floor. All that's left is this quiet, empty space inside me, and the haunting question of how I ever believed it was real in the first place. The phone felt cold and heavy in my hand. It was my mother-in-law. Her voice was sharp like shattered glass, and she said the words I'd always feared were lurking just beneath the surface. "You will never be real family to us. You are an outsider, and you always will be." Then she hung up. Just like that, the silence in the room after she spoke was louder than any sound I'd ever heard. I remember sinking to the floor right there in the kitchen, the cold tiles against my legs. My whole body felt numb. It was like the ground had opened up and swallowed me whole. All the years of trying, of bending over backwards, of biting my tongue, it all just evaporated in that one sentence. I felt so small, so powerless. It was a complete and total devastation. But then something shifted. It didn't happen right away. I sat there for a long time, just feeling the cold from the floor seep into me, and then a different feeling started to cut through the numbness. It was heat, it was anger, not a screaming, raging anger, but a deep, slow-burning fire. I realized I had a choice in that moment. I could lie down on that floor and let her words define me, let them become the truth of my life, or I could get up, I could get angry. I made the decision to get up, and in that decision I saw everything with a terrible, clear clarity. This wasn't about me. It wasn't a reflection of my worth or my character. Her words were a window into her soul, into a world that was so small and so bitter that it had to push people out to feel secure. The problem was her character, not mine. That was the first piece of my power I took back. I had to give myself permission to feel everything. I didn't try to be the bigger person right away. I was furious. I was heartbroken. I felt betrayed. I let myself cry until I had no tears left. I screamed into a pillow. I didn't judge myself for any of it. You have to let the storm happen. You can't skip that part. You have to feel the full weight of the devastation before you can even think about rebuilding. So I let myself be a victim for a little while because that's what I was in that moment, and then I knew I couldn't stay there. The first thing I did was reach out. I called my best friend, and I told her everything. I didn't sugarcoat it. I said the words out loud. My mother-in-law told me I will never be family. Speaking it made it real, but it also took away some of its power. She didn't try to fix it, she just listened, and then she said, I am your family. That was the beginning. I found an online community of people who had been through similar things with in-laws. Just reading their stories made me feel less alone. I started therapy, having a professional neutral space to untangle all the knots inside my head was essential. It was like having a guide for a journey I never wanted to take. I learned that seeking support isn't a sign of weakness, it's how you build a new foundation when the old one has crumbled. Then came the hardest part of the beginning. I had to set a boundary. My husband came home from work that night, and I was waiting for him. I was calm. The crying was done. I told him exactly what his mother had said. I watched his face. He was uncomfortable. He tried to make excuses. He said, you know how she is. She doesn't mean it. And that's when I knew I had to draw a line, not just with her, but with him. I told him that I was taking a step back. I said I would not be attending any family functions. I would not be answering her calls. And I needed space from him to figure out what this meant for us. I needed him to understand that his neutrality was a choice, and it was a choice that was hurting me. I packed a bag and I went to stay with my friend for a week. It was the most terrifying thing I'd ever done, but it was also the most empowering. I was showing myself that my well-being was non-negotiable while I was away. I started a journal. I wrote down everything, every slight, every backhanded compliment, every time I felt that subtle exclusion. I wrote down the phone call word for word. I did this because I just knew that the gaslighting would start, that the story would get twisted, that it would become I never said that, or you're being too sensitive. Writing it down anchored me to my own reality. It was proof for myself first and foremost that I wasn't crazy, that my feelings were valid, that the problem was real. After week, I agreed to meet my husband. We went to a neutral place, a quiet coffee shop. I was nervous, but I was also resolved. I had practiced what I needed to say. I looked him in the eye, and I used I statements. I said I felt completely betrayed when your mother said those words to me. I felt isolated and heartbroken when you dismissed my feelings about it. The impact of this on me has been profound. It has shaken my sense of safety in our marriage. I was very clear. I didn't blame or accuse. I just stated my truth. Then I laid out my terms. I told him that we could not go back to the way things were, that for our marriage to survive, he had to make a choice. He had to actively choose me. He had to choose our marriage. That meant committing to couples therapy with me immediately. It meant that he would have a conversation with his parents without me there, and he would set a firm boundary about respect. He would defend our family unit. I told him that this wasn't an ultimatum in the way people think of them, as a threat. It was a requirement for my self-respect. I said, if you cannot do these things, if you are not willing to prioritize me and our life together, then this marriage is over. I will not stay in a place where I am a second-class citizen. I was prepared for him to get defensive. I was prepared for him to dismiss me again, and I had a plan for that too. I told myself that if he started to make excuses, or if he tried to turn it around on me, I would stand up and I would walk away from the table. I would end the conversation because continuing, it would only be me begging for scraps of respect I deserved. Automatically, the power was in being willing to walk away. The power was in knowing my own value. With or without him. He was quiet for a long time. He looked down at his coffee, and then he looked up at me, and I saw something different in his eyes. It was sadness, but also a dawning understanding. He said, "You're right, I have failed you. I have been a coward. I am so sorry. I choose you. I will do whatever it takes." It was the moment everything changed. It wasn't a magic fix, but it was the start. The journey after that was long. We did go to therapy. It was hard, messy work. He did have that conversation with his parents. It was ugly. They didn't change, but he held that boundary. We saw them less. The interactions were strained, but they were on our terms now. My relationship with them is cordial, but distant, and I am at peace with that. They no longer have access to hurt me, because I have taken away their power. I have built a moat around my heart, not to keep love out, but to keep toxicity out. I focused on healing myself. I invested in my friendships, the ones that had been my lifeline. I nurtured those relationships. I built what I now call my chosen family. These are the people who show up for me, who celebrate me, who see me and value me. They are my aunts, my cousins, my sisters. They are bound to me not by blood, but by love and mutual respect. They are my real family. The liberation didn't come from them accepting me. The liberation came from me realizing I didn't need their acceptance to be whole. Being rejected from a toxic family system is not a failure, is an escape. It is a graduation. It is the universe making room for something better, for a love that is chosen and honest. My life now is built on a foundation of self-worth. I know what I deserve, and I will not settle for less. The moment I was told I would never be family was the moment I started building my own family that begins and ends with respect, and that is a power no one can ever take away. I could feel the tension building all week. It was a physical pressure right behind my eyes, a low hum of dread every time I thought about Sunday dinner. I knew how my mother could be. I knew the little comments she'd make, the subtle jabs disguised as concern, the way she'd look at Sarah when she thought no one was watching. I tried to tell myself it would be fine. Sarah is strong, she can handle it, and maybe Mom will be on her best behavior just this once. But hoping for that was like hoping a storm cloud won't rain. It's just what it does. It's hard to explain the feeling. It's not just about one dinner, it's a lifetime of conditioning. That's the only word for it. I can remember being a boy, maybe 8 or 9, and my mother asking me who I loved more, her or my father, and I knew the right answer, the answer that would make her smile, that would make her squeeze my cheek and call me her good boy. And I remember the one time I said something else, just a childish, honest thing, and the way the room went cold, the silence that lasted for days. You learn the rules. Early loyalty is rewarded. Defiance is a chill that seeps into the house and doesn't leave. I love Sarah. I love the life we've built together, the quiet mornings with coffee, the way she laughs with her whole body. She's my home. But when I think about my mother's disapproval, it's not a rational thing. It's a primal fear. It's this little boy inside me who's terrified of making her angry, of that cold silence. So I went into that dinner hoping, just desperately hoping, that I could skate through it, that I wouldn't have to choose, that I could be a good son and a good husband in the same room just for a few hours, without the two worlds colliding. The meal started okay, the usual small talk. How's work, how's the garden, but I could see my mother's eyes sharp and assessing, and I saw Sarah really trying to engage to find some common ground. And then it happened. My mother made a comment about Sarah's career. Something about it being ambitious for a woman with a tone that made it sound like an insult. I saw Sarah's smile tighten, and I felt it, a surge of protectiveness, a flash of heat. I wanted to say something. I opened my mouth, but then I looked at my mother. I saw the set of her jaw, the expectation in her eyes. And the fear just washed over me. It was instant. It was colder than the anger in that split second. My mind started racing. If I defend Sarah, my mother will feel attacked. The dinner will explode. There will be tears, accusations, weeks of strained phone calls, the guilt if I just let it go. If I side with my mother or even just stay quiet, the moment will pass. The peace, however fragile, will be preserved. It was a calculation, a terrible, cowardly calculation. I saw the path of least resistance, and I took it. I made some weak joke, tried to change the subject, but it was a betrayal. I could feel it the second the words left my mouth. I was siding with the aggressor. It was a survival tactic I'd learned as a kid, and I was using it on my own wife. The look on Sarah's face, I'll never forget it. It wasn't just anger, it was a kind of dissolution, like the image she had of me, of us, just shattered into a million pieces. Right there in front of the green bean casserole, the light in her eyes just went out, and in its place was a cold, hard understanding. And the shame was immediate. It was a nausea, a physical revulsion at myself. How could I do that? How could I be so weak? I just sacrificed the person I love most to appease the person I fear the most. My mind started scrambling for excuses, even as my heart was sinking. It was just to keep the peace. Sarah, you know how she is. I'll talk to her later. I'll make it up to you. We'll laugh about this tomorrow. But the excuses were hollow even to me. They were the same flimsy walls I'd built my whole life, and the worst part was seeing my mother's face. She had this slight, satisfied smile, shed one unspoken pact was reinforced. Her son was still hers. That look of triumph on her face made me feel sick, but it also felt familiar. It was the old pattern clicking back into place, and I had just oiled the gears myself. Then Sarah spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the chatter like a scalpel. There was no tremor, no hesitation. It was calm and final. She said she was leaving, that she couldn't do this anymore, that she refused to be part of a dynamic where she was always the outsider, and where her own husband wouldn't stand up for her. She didn't. She just stated it as a fact, and she stood up and walked out of the dining room. A moment later, I heard the front door close. The sound was so small, but it was the loudest thing I've ever heard. The silence she left behind was absolute. My mother started talking, saying something about dramatic reactions, but her voice was just a buzz in my ears. All I could see was the empty chair. All I could feel was the void where my wife used to be. The consequences of what I had done landed on me with the weight of a building. This wasn't a tiff. This wasn't something to be smoothed over with flowers. I had broken something fundamental. I had broken her trust. I had potentially destroyed my marriage, my real family, for the sake of a temporary false peace with my mother. And in that awful silent clarity, I saw the two paths ahead of me with terrifying sharpness. One path was familiar. It was the path of least resistance. I could stay here. I could let my mother comfort me, tell me that Sarah was never right for me anyway. I could fall back into the old cycle where I'm the victim and she's my protector. It would be easy. It's a well-worn groove in my life. The other path is terrifying. It means standing up. It means finally having that confrontation with my mother that I've avoided my whole life. It means facing her anger, her disappointment, her guilt-tripping. It means untangling a lifetime of wires that have been twisted around my heart. It means fighting for Sarah if she'll even have me. It means becoming a man who is brave enough for the hard, messy truth of real love instead of hiding in the cold, predictable safety of conditional approval and still sitting here. The dinner is ruined, the house is quiet. My mother is in the other room waiting for me to come to her, and I have to choose: do I stay her son, the good boy who never rocks the boat, or do I become the husband my wife deserves? The choice feels impossible, but for the first time I think I see the cost of each one clearly. The cost of staying is losing everything that truly matters. The cost of changing is facing every fear I've ever run from. The question isn't what I should do, the question is who do I want to be. The first time I walked into his family's home, I thought I understood what I was getting into. I'd read the books, I'd tried to learn a few phrases, I brought the right kind of gift, or so I thought. The air was thick with smells I couldn't name, spices that were foreign and wonderful to me, and the noise, the beautiful chaotic noise of a big family all talking over each other. I remember thinking, this is it, this is love, this big, loud, complicated thing, and I wanted to be part of it more than anything, but love the kind I felt for your father. It was just one piece of the puzzle. There was this whole other world of tradition, of unspoken rules, the way his mother, your grandmother, would watch me. It wasn't a hostile watch, not at first. It was more like an assessment. She was measuring the distance between what I was and what I was supposed to be, the way I held my fork, the way I greeted the elders, the clothes I wore, which were always just a little bit wrong, too formal or too casual. I tried so hard. I learned how to make the dishes he loved from his childhood, spending hours on a single sauce trying to get the taste just right. I practiced the phrases until my tongue felt thick in my mouth. I wanted to show them that I respected them, that I valued where he came from. And your father, he was my bridge. Had squeezed my hand under the table when I felt overwhelmed, had translate the rapid-fire conversations that flew right past me, but there was a line he never seemed to cross. When his mother would make a comment, a little jab about how things were done properly back home, he'd just laugh it off, change the subject. He'd say, "Oh, Mom, don't worry, she's learning." It was a defense, but a weak one. It never addressed the real issue, which was that I was being judged against a standard I could never fully meet. I was an outsider trying to earn a membership that was always going to be provisional. The confrontation didn't happen at a holiday or a big event. It was an ordinary Tuesday. We were over for dinner, just the three of us. Your grandmother had made one of his favorite meals. The conversation was light until it wasn't. We were talking about you, about starting a family, and she put her fork down. The sound was so final. She looked at me, and all the polite pretense was gone from her eyes. She said, "You are a nice woman. I see you try, but you must understand. You will never truly be one of us. Your blood is different. Your ways are different. You come from a different world." It was so calm, so matter-of-fact. It wasn't shouted in anger. It was delivered like a verdict, a cultural verdict. She wasn't just rejecting me, the person. She was rejecting everything I represented, my family, my background, the entire culture that made me who I am. She was drawing a line in the sand, and she was placing me firmly on the other side. And the worst part, the part that took the air right out of my lungs, was your father's silence. He just stared at his plate. He didn't look at me. He didn't defend me. He just let her words hang there in the room, and in that silence I felt him agree. His agreement was rooted in something deeper than just not wanting to argue with his mother. It was a lifetime of filial duty, of cultural pressure. In that moment he chose the world he was born into over the world we were trying to build together. I wasn't just fighting her, I was fighting centuries of tradition. After I left, the numbness wore off. The grief was so complicated. It wasn't just sadness, it was a swirling mess of anger and confusion. I started to question everything about myself. Was my natural way of speaking too loud? Were my family's traditions somehow less than? Should I have tried harder to erase my own accent, my own history? I felt this immense pressure to change the core of who I was, to shrink myself down to a size that would fit into their narrow definition of belonging, and at the same time, I felt a fierce defensive pride in my own heritage. It created this terrible rift inside me. I felt caught between two worlds, and I started to feel like I didn't fully belong to either. I wasn't enough for them, and in trying to be, I felt like I was betraying a part of myself. I felt so alone. But then I started looking for stories like mine. I found communities, online groups for people in intercultural marriages, and I realized I wasn't alone. I heard the same stories over and over. The mother-in-law who refused to learn how to pronounce a name correctly, the family gatherings where someone was always treated like a guest, never like family. I heard about the compromises, the tiny pieces of yourself people chipped away over years trying to find acceptance. And I heard the regret in the voices of those who had sacrificed too much. They talked about losing their sense of self, about the resentment that built up. It was a dangerous path. How much of yourself do you sacrifice? Where do you draw the line? After months of this turmoil, something in me just settled. I made a decision. I was going to stop trying to earn a place in a family that defined belonging so narrowly. The goalposts were always going to move. I realized that my culture, my background, wasn't a barrier to overcome. It was a strength. It was a part of the richness I brought to our life. The foods, the stories, the perspectives, they weren't flaws, they were gifts. I started embracing my own heritage with a new sense of pride. I stopped seeing my differences as a problem to be solved. The real work began at home with your father. We had to have the conversations we'd been avoiding. We had to build our own culture for our own family, a new culture, one that could honor both of our backgrounds without demanding that one submit to the other. We decided that our household would be its own country with its own unique traditions. Maybe we'd celebrate holidays from both sides, creating new rituals that felt true to us. The language we spoke at home would be a mix of both. It wouldn't be about his culture or my culture winning. It would be about creating something new, something that was authentically ours. And I started looking outward. I sought out community, not based on bloodline, but on shared values. I found friends from all sorts of backgrounds, people who celebrated diversity instead of fearing it, people who were curious about my traditions and eager to share their own. In their homes, I felt a sense of belonging that I never felt in my in-laws' house. It was a belonging based on mutual respect, not on a checklist of cultural compliance. The rejection still stings. It's a scar, but it forced me to ask a fundamental question. Who did I want to be? The answer wasn't to become more like them. The answer was to become more fully, authentically myself. The cultural clash wasn't just a problem, it was an invitation to define acceptance on my own terms, to build a family and a life where difference isn't just tolerated, but seen as essential, as beautiful, and that in the end is a much stronger foundation than trying to fit into a world that was never meant for you. The shock of it is physical. It feels like the floor has vanished, and you're just hanging in the air for a moment before the fall. The words hang there, "You're not family," and they change everything. The person you built a life with, the person you trusted more than anyone, has just redrawn the map of your world, and you're left standing in a territory that's suddenly foreign and hostile. The grief is immense. The betrayal is a constant aching pressure in your chest. But right now, in these first hours and days, the most important thing you can do for yourself is to put that pain into a box. Not forever. You will open that box later with a therapist, with a trusted friend, and you will process it. But for now, you have to put it on a shelf. Your primary job is to become a pragmatic operator. Your only focus is on building a fortress of security around yourself, piece by piece. The emotional storm will rage, but you need to build a shelter from it. The first rule is this: do not make any permanent legal decisions while you are in this raw state. Do not threaten divorce. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. But at the same time, you must take immediate, quiet steps to secure your own well-being. Your first move is a practical one. You need to gather the tools of your own life. Find a box or a folder and start collecting the documents that prove you exist as an independent person: your passport, your birth certificate, your social security card, your driver's license. Then move to the financial records, bank statements for all accounts, both joint and individual, tax returns from the last 3 to 5 years, property deeds for the house, the car, titles, investment account statements. If you have a prenuptial agreement, that goes in the folder. This isn't about being sneaky. This is about ensuring you have access to the information that defines your financial and legal identity. You cannot rely on having access to a shared filing cabinet later. Simultaneously, you need to build your support team, but you must do it with discretion. Your first call should be to a therapist. This is non-negotiable. You need a professional, a confidential space to deal with the emotional tsunami. This person is your anchor. Your second call, made from a private phone if possible, is to a family law attorney. Most will offer a confidential consultation. You are not hiring them on the spot. You are going to them for information. You need to understand your rights, your options, and the legal landscape you are about to navigate. Keep these 2 roles separate. Your therapist guides your heart, your attorney guides your strategy. Tell no one else, especially not mutual friends or family, about these consultations. Secrecy is your shield right now. Once you have your bearings, the financial separation begins. This is the concrete foundation of your new independence. Your first tangible action should be to open a bank account in your name only, and I mean only your name. Do not use your joint bank to do this. Go to a completely different financial institution. Deposit whatever funds you feel are necessary to cover your immediate living expenses for a few months. This isn't about hiding money. It's about creating a source of funds that you control exclusively, so you are not financially paralyzed. Next, change every password. You have your personal email, your social media, any online banking you access. Use a brand new password that you have never used before, something strong and complex. This is a basic step for your digital security and privacy. You need a space that is entirely your own. Where your communications are safe, then begin the tedious but critical work of documentation. You need a clear factual record of your marital estate. Make a list of all assets: the house, its estimated value, the cars, the retirement accounts, the investment portfolios. Also list all the debts: the mortgage, the car loans, credit card balances. Be meticulous. Knowing exactly what exists is your first step toward understanding what a fair division would look like. It prevents you from being blindsided later. Understand the legalities in your state regarding jointly held property. In many places, moving large sums of money from a joint account can be seen as dissipating marital assets. Your initial transfer to your new account should be reasonable for living expenses. Any major moves should be discussed with your attorney first. The question of where you will live is one of the most difficult and strategically important. The marital home is a powerful symbol, and the decision of who leaves has legal implications. If you feel emotionally unsafe, or if you anticipate any kind of harassment or conflict, your physical safety comes first. You should leave, but if you can manage the tension, there can be advantages to staying in the home. Leaving can sometimes be misinterpreted as abandoning the property. If you do decide to leave, be strategic. Take your essential belongings, your clothes, your personal documents, your laptop, items of sentimental value before you go. Take pictures or a video of every room in the house. Document the condition of everything. This creates a record in case of any disputes about property damage later. You will also need to establish a new secure mailing address. A post office box is a good temporary solution. This ensures that all correspondence from your attorney or any new accounts comes directly to you without interception. Now you shift from defense to building your case for the future. This is where you become a historian of your own life. Start a journal. This is not an emotional diary, though feelings will creep in. This is a factual log. Write down the date and time of the initial confrontation. Record any subsequent interactions. If they try to talk what was said, keep it neutral. October 26, 7:30 p.m. Spoken kitchen discussion about holiday plans became tense. They stated they would be making plans independently. This log creates a timeline that can be invaluable for your attorney. Save everything: every text message, every email, every voicemail that relates to the breakdown of the marriage. If communication becomes hostile or threatening, you have a record. If they make promises or admissions, you have a record. Do not delete anything. Back up your phone, screenshot important texts, and email them to your secure private email address. This digital paper trail is evidence of the relationship's deterioration with your attorney. You need to understand the specific grounds for divorce in your state or country. Is it an OFO state where you don't need to prove wrongdoing? Or are there fault-based grounds like abandonment or constructive abandonment that might apply to your situation? The phrase "you're not family" and the associated alienation could potentially be a factor depending on local laws. Your attorney will translate your personal nightmare into legal terminology. Finally, you must force your gaze to the horizon. This is the hardest part. You have to start thinking about your life as a single person. What does your budget look like on one income? What are your career prospects? Do you need additional training or education? This is not about being pessimistic. It is about being powerful. It is about taking control of a future that right now feels stolen from you. You are no longer planning for a shared retirement. You are planning for your retirement. Every financial decision you make from this point forward is an investment in your own security and independence. You are learning in the most brutal way possible that the only person you can truly rely on is yourself. And that knowledge, as painful as it is to acquire, is the greatest form of protection there is. You are building a life where no one can ever again have the power to say you're not family and leave you with nothing. You are making sure that you will always have yourself. The silence after he left was the loudest sound I have ever known. It wasn't just an absence of noise, it was a presence. It filled the house, heavy and thick, pressing down on everything. For the first few days I didn't answer my phone. I let every call from him go to voicemail. I needed the space, the absolute quiet, to hear my own thoughts again, to separate his voice and hers from my own. The anger was the first wave. It was hot and sharp, and it felt good in a way. It was a fire that kept me moving, cleaning things that were already clean, organizing drawers that didn't need it. I'd find something of his, a stray pen or a book had been reading, and the heat would flare up again. But anger is a fuel that burns out quickly. It left me empty. And then the grief rolled in. This was a different kind of quiet, a deep, aching sadness for the life I thought we had, for the future I believed in. I cried for the woman. I was the one who trusted him completely. I had to let her go. And then something shifted. The storm of emotions passed, not all at once, but gradually. The silence stopped being oppressive and started to become clear. It was in that clarity that I found a new kind of strength. It wasn't loud or fiery. It was a calm, solid understanding deep in my bones. I knew what I needed. I knew what I deserved. I wasn't making a decision from a place of panic or pain anymore. I was standing on solid ground. His attempts to contact me started slowly. A text, "Can we talk?" Then another, "I'm sorry you're upset." That one I almost replied to. Sorry. I was upset. That wasn't an apology, that was an accusation. Then the voicemail started. Some were pleading, full of excuses about the pressure from his mother. Others were frustrated, asking how long I was going to keep this up. None of them contained the one thing I was listening for, a true, unqualified acknowledgement of what he had done. Not that I was upset, but what he had chosen. He had chosen her over me, over us. I had a list in my head, a set of criteria for what genuine remorse would sound like. It wouldn't mention his mother's influence. It wouldn't talk about the difficulty of his position. It would be simple. I betrayed you. I broke my vows. My choice was wrong, and I am solely responsible. I didn't hear that. After 3 weeks, I texted him back. I said we could meet one conversation. I named a public park, a bench I knew that was usually quiet in the mid-morning. I set a time limit, 1 hour. I said the agenda was simple, to see if there was a path forward. I wasn't going in with hope. I was going in with clarity. I saw him before he saw me. He was sitting on the bench, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. He looked tired. For a moment my heart ached for him. The old instinct to comfort him rose up, but I let it pass. I had to. I walked over and sat down, leaving a clear space between us. The morning sun was warm on my face. I didn't wait for him to speak. I started. My voice was steady, which surprised me. I told him that his decision at the hospital wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, a deliberate choice, to prioritize his mother's comfort over my life, over the life of our child. I said that the betrayal wasn't just about the signature on a form. It was about the years of smaller choices that led to it. The times he let her comments slide, the times he asked me to be the bigger person. I explained that his choice revealed a fundamental truth that in his heart, his primary loyalty was still to her. I didn't say it as an accusation, I said it as a fact. That now existed between us as solid as the bench we were sitting on. He was quiet for a long time. He stared at his hands. I could see him wrestling with it. This was the moment. This was where the path would split. He finally looked up, and his eyes were red. He said, "You're right." 2 words, but they were the right 2 words. Then he said, "I was a coward. I was so afraid of her disappointment, of her anger, that I sacrificed you to avoid it. I chose the easy path, and it was the most wrong thing I have ever done. There is no excuse. It was my failure, my betrayal." He didn't mention her name. He didn't blame the stress of the situation. He took the full weight of it and placed it on his own shoulders. It was what I needed to hear, but words weren't enough. I had my non-negotiable demands ready. I laid them out, one by one. First, permanent structural boundaries with his mother. That meant no more unsupervised time with her. All communication would go through a joint email account we would monitor together. She would no longer have a key to our home, and she would not be involved in our personal decisions ever again. Second, a commitment to intensive couples therapy for as long as it took to rebuild the trust he shattered. And third, and most important, a new demonstrable primary loyalty to me, to our marriage, that his vows to me would come before any sense of obligation to her from this day forward. I told him that if he couldn't agree to these terms completely and without reservation, then this conversation was our last. That this was the only chance I had to give. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't flinch when I mentioned the email account or the therapy. When I finished, he nodded slowly. He said, "I agree to all of it. I will do whatever it takes." And then he said something I didn't expect. "I need to learn how to be a husband, a real one to you." That was the beginning of path of reconciliation. But it wasn't a happy ending. It was the start of a different, harder journey. The work was brutal. Therapy was painful. We had to dissect decades of his conditioning, his enmeshment with his mother. There were setbacks. She would launch a new guilt campaign, and sometimes he would wobble. But the difference was now he would come to me head satious, trying to get to me and in struggling, and we would talk about it. We faced it together. Rebuilding trust isn't a straight line. It's a daily practice. It's him coming home on time every time. It's him choosing a movie I want to watch without checking if his mother would approve. It's 1,000 small choices that slowly, brick by brick, build a new foundation, a stronger one. But I also played out path B in my head. I had to be ready for it. If on that bench his response had been different, if he had said, "You're overreacting," or "She's my mother," what was I supposed to do? If he had refused the boundaries or dismissed the therapy as unnecessary, then I knew what I would have done. I would have felt a final quiet click inside me, a door closing. I would have stood up from that bench. I would have looked at the man I loved, the man who chose to stay a son rather than become a husband, and I would have felt nothing but a profound, peaceful sadness. I would have said then, "This is over. I wish you well," and I would have walked away. The final break, it would have been devastating, but it would have been clean. It would have been a decision made from self-respect. In either outcome, the most important relationship was the one I forged with myself in that silence. I learned that my peace, my safety, my respectability are not bargaining chips. They are the foundation of everything. Whether I was walking the difficult path of reconciliation or the painful path of separation, I was doing it from a place of my own choosing. I was no longer a victim of his choices. I was the author of my own. The lesson wasn't about whether marriage is good or bad, it was about what any relationship requires. To be healthy, it requires a backbone of self-respect. It requires that you value your own peace more than you value the label of being a couple, letting go of the dream of what I thought my marriage was. That was the hardest part, but in letting it go I made room for what could be a life built on truth, not on obligation, a future where I am whole with or without him. And that future, whatever it holds, is finally truly peaceful.